We are obsessed with sleep. We track its phases with smart watches, buy orthopedic mattresses, and listen to soothing rain sounds through apps. We think that a good night's rest is a complex science, only accessible in the 21st century. But what if I told you that our sleep problems are just a shadow of the challenges faced by people in the Victorian era? Their nights were filled with difficulties that are hard for us to even imagine today. It was a nightly battle for the right to simply rest in a world that knew no peace or quiet. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn why the concept of 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep was as fantastical to Victorians as time travel is to us. What if I told you that everything you believed about sleep is not true? The very idea that a person should sleep 8 hours straight is a modern invention. Victorians, like their ancestors, lived in a rhythm of biphasic sleep, which seems completely alien to us today. Their night was divided into 2 parts. The first sleep began shortly after sunset and lasted about 4 hours. Then people woke up in the middle of the night, and this period of wakefulness was a perfectly normal part of their lives. This interval, lasting an hour or 2, was not a time of anxiety and insomnia. On the contrary, it was the quietest and most private time of the day. People used it for reflection, prayer, or reading by candlelight. A special, peaceful atmosphere reigned in homes. Family members could chat quietly, discuss the past day, or make plans for the future. It was a time for closeness, free from the hustle and bustle of the day and social conventions. Doctors of the time even gave recommendations on how best to spend this nighttime break. It was believed that it was during these hours that knowledge was best absorbed and the most sound thoughts came. It was a time for creativity and self-analysis. This sleep pattern was so natural that references to first and second sleep are found throughout the literature, court documents, and personal diaries of the era. No one considered it a violation or a problem. It was simply the established order of things. The disappearance of biphasic sleep began with the spread of street lighting and then indoor lighting. Artificial light made it possible to extend the active day, shifting bedtime to later hours. Night ceased to be a time of rest and became an enemy to be defeated by light. Gradually, the idea of a single, continuous block of sleep became the social norm. Waking up in the middle of the night began to be perceived as a sign of insomnia, as a medical problem. We lost that unique pause, that time for silence and for ourselves. Modern scientists believe that such segmented sleep may be more natural for the human body. Perhaps the Victorians, despite all the difficulties, intuitively understood something about sleep that we have forgotten. We traded their quiet nighttime pause for anxious attempts to fall asleep again. We would be very interested to hear your point of view. Do you think such biphasic sleep would take root in the modern world with its frantic pace? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about the sounds that drove an entire generation crazy? Modern cities seem noisy to us, but we can't even imagine the background noise of the Victorian era. It was a time when silence was a luxury that was inaccessible to most people. The Industrial Revolution brought with it round-the-clock noise. Factories and mills never stopped for a minute, their steam hammers and machines creating a constant low-frequency hum. This sound penetrated the thin walls of houses, becoming an integral part of the night. Added to this was the noise of the railways that cut through the cities, the horns of locomotives, the clanging of coupling carriages, the creaking of wheels. All this could be heard for miles around. For residents of areas adjacent to the railroad tracks, a quiet night simply did not exist. The streets did not quiet down even late at night. Heavy horse-drawn carts rumbled over the cobblestones. The sound of iron rims on stone was deafening and sharp, making it impossible to sleep. Even when the factories and transport quieted down, other sounds appeared. Night traders shouted their calls and groups of late revelers sang songs loudly. Police whistles and shouts added to this chaotic urban cacophony. Houses at that time had no soundproofing. The walls were thin and the windows were single pane, letting in all the noise from the street. Neighbors could be heard as if they were in the same room. For residents of apartment buildings, especially in poor neighborhoods, the situation was even worse. Dozens of families lived in cramped conditions, and any sound, from a baby's cry to a sick person's cough, instantly became public knowledge. There was simply no such thing as a private, quiet space. It was quieter in rural areas, but there were sources of noise there too. The creaking of windmills, the barking of dogs, the cries of night birds. However, this noise was more natural and predictable than the chaotic din of the city. This constant background noise had serious consequences. It didn't just prevent people from sleeping, it depleted the nervous system, causing chronic stress and anxiety. Victorians lived in a state of constant acoustic tension. They tried to combat the noise as best they could. They used heavy curtains and plugged their ears with cotton wool. But all these measures were only a feeble attempt to protect themselves from the relentless roar of the approaching industrial era. What sound do you think was the most unbearable for a Victorian sleep? But what if I told you that the real enemy of sleep was not sound, but what was hidden in the bed itself? What I am about to tell you will make you appreciate your modern bed. For us, a bed is synonymous with comfort and cleanliness. For Victorians, it was a battleground for hygiene and a place full of hidden inconveniences. The mattresses of that time had little in common with our orthopedic designs. At best, they were stuffed with horsehair, wool, or feathers. Over time, these materials clumped together, forming lumps and hollows, making sleep intermittent and restless. The poor had it even worse. Their mattresses were often stuffed with straw, dry leaves, or even wood shavings. Such a mattress was hard, prickly, and required constant replacement of the filling, which quickly turned to dust. Caring for such a mattress was a real chore. It had to be regularly taken outside, beaten to remove dust, and aired out. Washing the mattress itself was practically impossible. Bed linen was washed by hand in large cauldrons with boiling water and lye. It was hard physical labor that took a whole day. Therefore, linen was changed much less frequently than we are used to today. The very design of the beds contributed to the discomfort. Spring mattresses were rare and expensive. Most often, the mattress lay on a system of crossed ropes, which had to be regularly tightened with a special wrench so that they did not sag. But the main problem that turned the night into torture was insects. The constant struggle with bed bugs was a reality for all walks of life. These nocturnal parasites hid in the cracks of wooden beds, in the seams of mattresses, and in the folds of linen. Their presence was not just a physical discomfort, it caused psychological stress, feelings of shame and disgust. People woke up from bites and spent sleepless hours trying to find and destroy the pests. A variety of methods were used to combat them. Beds were treated with turpentine, kerosene, or boiling water. The legs of the beds were placed in bowls of water to create a barrier for the insects. However, all these methods had only a temporary effect. It was almost impossible to completely get rid of this scourge under Victorian hygiene conditions. The bed, which was supposed to be a refuge, often became a source of suffering. Guess what room temperature was considered normal for sleeping in the Victorian era? We are used to central heating and a comfortable microclimate in our bedrooms. For Victorians, nighttime, especially in winter, was a time of real hardship due to the cold. Most houses were heated only by fireplaces or coal stoves. These provided warmth in only one or two rooms, usually the living room or kitchen. Bedrooms remained unheated and freezing. At night, when the fire in the fireplace died down, the temperature in the house dropped sharply. In the bedroom, it could drop to almost the same temperature as outside. This meant that people slept in rooms where the temperature was close to zero. Waking up in such a bedroom was a real shock to the body. A layer of frost formed on the inside of the window panes overnight. The water in the wash jug could be covered with a crust of ice. Special devices were used to keep warm in bed. The most common was a metal hot water bottle, a flat, hermetically sealed vessel filled with hot water or smoldering coals. This hot water bottle was placed in bed sometime before bedtime to warm the sheets. Those who could not afford a hot water bottle used simpler methods. They heated bricks or stones in the oven, wrapped them in cloth, and placed them in bed. These improvised hot water bottles retained heat for a long time. People slept in several layers of clothing. In addition to a nightgown, they wore warm stockings and a nightcap on their heads. This headdress was not a fashion accessory, but a necessity, as a significant amount of heat escapes through the head. They covered themselves with several heavy blankets and quilted bedspreads. These blankets were quite heavy, which could interfere with comfortable sleep. Sometimes they even piled on outer clothing or rugs. The constant cold prevented the body from relaxing and falling into a deep sleep. The body expended a huge amount of energy just to keep warm. People often woke up from the cold, huddled under a mountain of blankets. This nightly struggle with the cold was exhausting and weakened the immune system. People became more susceptible to colds and other illnesses. A comfortable and warm sleep was a luxury available only to a few. Do you think you could sleep in such conditions? But the cold was not the only threat lurking in the darkness of night. In the next chapter, you will learn why Victorians feared the very air they breathed. The Victorian era was dominated by the medical theory of miasmas. It was believed that many diseases were spread through bad air, or miasmas. These poisonous vapors were thought to rise from rotting organic matter, swamps, and sewage, especially under the cover of night. This fear of night air led people to sleep with their windows and doors tightly closed. They believed that a hermetically sealed room was the best protection against invisible contagion. As a result, bedrooms became veritable death traps. Oxygen was quickly depleted in such rooms. The air became stale, heavy, and filled with carbon dioxide. This led to headaches, dizziness, and a general feeling of exhaustion in the morning. The situation was exacerbated by sources of lighting and heating. Coal-burning fireplaces, gas lamps, and candles burned up the remaining oxygen and released soot and other harmful substances into the air. Breathing such air all night was extremely harmful to the lungs. Sanitation levels in cities were low. Odors from cesspools, garbage heaps, and industrial emissions penetrated homes. Victorians tried to combat this by closing their windows tightly, but this only created an even more unhealthy atmosphere inside. Bedrooms had a lot of textiles, heavy curtains, canopies over beds, carpets. All these items accumulated dust and became an ideal breeding ground for dust mites. This caused allergies and breathing problems. Paradoxically, in an attempt to protect themselves from disease, the Victorians created the ideal conditions for it to develop. The lack of ventilation contributed to the spread of airborne infections. Anyone sharing a room with a sick person was almost certain to become infected. Paradoxically, in an attempt to protect themselves from disease, the Victorians created the ideal conditions for it to develop. The lack of ventilation contributed to the spread of airborne infections. Anyone sharing a room with a sick person was almost certain to become infected. This fear of fresh air is a striking example of how scientific misconceptions can directly affect quality of life and health. Victorians slept poorly not only because of noise and cold, but also because of their own fears. They suffocated in their bedrooms, believing they were saving their lives. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what kept even the wealthiest Victorians awake at night? Today, when we feel unwell, we can take effective painkillers. For Victorians, however, many chronic but non-fatal conditions turned into years of torture from insomnia. One of the most common problems was dyspepsia, or simply indigestion. The Victorian diet, especially among the wealthy classes, was heavy and fatty. A large dinner late in the evening often led to heartburn, bloating, and stomach pains that prevented sleep. Dental care was in its infancy. A simple toothache, which we can treat today in a single visit to the dentist, could torment a person for weeks. Aching, throbbing pain became a constant companion, making nights unbearable. Chronic coughing was another problem, especially in industrial cities. Coal dust, soot, and smog caused constant irritation of the respiratory tract. Coughing fits woke up both the patient and everyone else sleeping in the same room. Rheumatism and joint pain were widespread due to the damp climate, heavy physical labor, and lack of effective treatment. On cold and damp nights, these pains intensified, making it impossible to find a comfortable sleeping position. The body was constantly aching and sore. Even common skin problems could be a source of serious discomfort. Without modern ointments and medicines, the itching from eczema or other rashes could be unbearable. Scratching the skin during sleep led to even more irritation and interrupted rest. The level of medicine at the time did not allow for effective treatment of these conditions. Doctors prescribed strange diets, poultices, or bitter mixtures with questionable effects. Often the only cure was patience. For many people, a state of constant mild discomfort was the norm. They got used to their pain and discomfort, but this inevitably affected the quality of their sleep. Their rest was superficial and did not bring complete recovery. The lack of effective painkillers was a key problem. People were forced to accept pain as an inevitable part of existence. At night, when the cares of the day receded, pain came to the fore, becoming the master of the dark bedroom. Which of these ailments do you find most painful for sleep? But even if a Victorian was healthy and warmly covered, their sleep could be interrupted by light. In the next chapter, we will learn how a new invention designed to conquer the night became another enemy of sleep. For thousands of years, the rhythm of human life was determined by the sun. With the onset of darkness, activity ceased and sleep came naturally. The Victorian era was the first time that humans challenged the night with artificial lighting. The spread of gas lamps in city streets radically changed the nighttime landscape. The dim light of candles and oil lamps was replaced by bright and harsh gas lighting. Night was no longer completely dark, which disrupted the natural cycles of sleep and wakefulness. The light from street lamps penetrated bedrooms through windows that were rarely covered with thick curtains. This new phenomenon, which we now call light pollution, interfered with the production of melatonin. It became more difficult to fall asleep in a lit room. Then gaslighting came to the homes of wealthy citizens. This allowed for extended evening activity. People began to go to bed later, reading, playing cards, or entertaining guests by the bright light of gas lamps. The quality of this light was far from ideal. Gas lamps burned unevenly, flickered, hissed, and emitted an unpleasant odor. Being in such an atmosphere in the evening was tiring for the eyes and nervous system, which did not contribute to subsequent relaxation. Towards the end of the era, electric lighting appeared. It was even brighter and harsher than gas lighting. Early incandescent lamps gave off a cold bluish light, which particularly suppressed the production of the sleep hormone. Artificially extending the day disrupted the body's internal clock. People began to sleep less, considering sleep to be something of an annoying necessity that took time away from work and entertainment. A cult of wakefulness emerged, especially in business circles. This departure from the natural rhythm of day and night had long-term health consequences. Chronic sleep deprivation became the norm for many city dwellers. Fatigue and irritability became constant companions of the industrial age. In addition to physical discomfort, the sleep of Victorians was disrupted by numerous psychological stressors. It was an era of enormous social change, uncertainty about the future, and strict moral frameworks. Anxiety was a constant backdrop to their lives. Economic stability was a privilege enjoyed by few. For most, losing one's job meant immediate impoverishment and the prospect of ending up in a workhouse. This fear of losing one's livelihood did not let up even at night. Social mobility was limited, and the pressure of social norms was enormous. The need to maintain one's reputation, conform to strict rules of propriety, and fear condemnation created constant internal tension. Any mistake could lead to social ostracism. Despite progress, the level of medicine remained low by modern standards. Life was fragile and the future unpredictable. These existential anxieties inevitably affected the quality of sleep. For women, the pressure was even greater. Their lives were strictly regulated and opportunities for self-fulfillment were limited. Feelings of depression, dissatisfaction, and hopelessness often resulted in insomnia and nervous disorders. Even family life provided many causes for concern. Strict Victorian upbringing, based on the suppression of emotions, led to the accumulation of internal conflicts. Unspoken grievances and suppressed desires returned at night in the form of disturbing thoughts. Religion played a huge role in society. For many, it was a source of comfort, but for others, it was a cause of constant fear of divine punishment. Thoughts of sin and eternal damnation could interfere with peaceful sleep as much as a toothache. Faced with insomnia caused by noise, pain, or anxiety, Victorians desperately sought relief. The pharmaceutical market of the time offered a variety of remedies for insomnia. However, most of them were ineffective at best and downright dangerous at worst. The main and most accessible sleep aid was alcohol. A glass of wine, a mug of ale, or a shot of brandy before bed was common practice. Alcohol did help people fall asleep faster, but the quality of sleep was very poor. Modern science knows that alcohol suppresses the rapid eye movement, REM, phase of sleep, which is the most important for mental recovery. As a result, people woke up feeling unrested and exhausted. In addition, regular use of alcohol as a sleeping pill quickly led to addiction. An even more dangerous remedy was laudanum, an alcohol tincture of opium. This substance was sold freely in pharmacies without a prescription and was advertised as a universal cure-all. It was even given to small children to calm them down. Laudanum did indeed induce deep sleep, but it was a narcotic stupor, not healthy rest. It quickly became highly addictive. Many Victorians, having started taking it for insomnia, unwittingly became opium addicts. In addition to these two giants of the Victorian pharmacopoeia, there were many patented mixtures and syrups. Their composition was often kept secret, but many of them contained the same opiates, alcohol, and sometimes other dangerous substances. Advertisements promised instant relief from insomnia, but were silent about the side effects. There were also harmless but useless remedies. herbal teas, soothing baths, special diets. Some doctors advised eating something very boring before bed, such as dry biscuits, believing that this would distract the brain from anxious thoughts. Modern people perceive the bedroom and bed as a deeply personal, intimate space. It is our refuge, a place where we can be alone with ourselves. For the vast majority of Victorians, such a luxury as privacy simply did not exist. In working-class families, life often took place in a single room. This is where they cooked, ate, worked, and slept. Several generations, parents, children, and sometimes grandparents, lived in a few square meters. Everyone had to sleep together in such conditions. Often, 3 or 4 people, including adults and children, would sleep in one bed. There was simply no concept of personal space in bed. This created a lot of discomfort that interfered with normal sleep. Some people snored, some coughed, some tossed and turned in their sleep. Any movement or sound made by one person immediately woke the others. The lack of privacy was not only a physical, but also a psychological factor. It was impossible to completely relax knowing that you were in constant contact with other people. This was especially difficult for teenagers and young married couples. Even in wealthier families where children could have their own rooms, they often slept 2 or 3 to a bed. This was considered normal and even beneficial, as the children kept each other warm in the cold rooms. But no one thought about the quality of sleep. Factory noise, freezing bedrooms, fear of the night air, constant illness and anxiety. We can see that nighttime was full of trials for Victorians. Their struggle for sleep was daily and exhausting. They lived in a world that seemed to be designed specifically to prevent people from resting. Their experience shows how much our lives have changed and how much we have gained. Central heating, soundproofing, effective medicine, and an understanding of the importance of sleep hygiene. We take all of this for granted, but for people of the Victorian era, it would have been a real pipe dream. Studying their problems helps us appreciate the comforts we have more. Perhaps the next time we can't sleep, we will remember the Victorians and realize that our sleep problems, however serious they may seem, are but a pale shadow of their nighttime suffering. What other aspects of everyday life in the Victorian era would you like to explore? Perhaps you are interested in their food, fashion, or medicine? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes.